Is counsel ready for the jury? All right. Thank you, Deputy. Okay, please be seated. Members of the jury, at some point a firearm and taser will be brought into the courtroom and offered as evidence. Any weapon or taser will be secured in a way to ensure it can be safely handled. You should know that the firearm has been examined and will come into the courtroom unloaded and secured with a device that will be visible to you in the court. The firearm securing device will be such that it will be physically impossible to operate the firing mechanism of the firearm or put a bullet into the firearm. The firearm securing device will be locked and the key will be maintained by court staff. Is the state prepared to call its first witness?
We are, Your Honor. The state calls Katie Bryant.
Okay. Ms. Bryant, will you please come forward and stand next to me in front of the witness chair? Raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify in connection with this cause?
I do.
All right, please have a seat. And then you may remove your mask. All right, counsel, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Could you state your name, please, and spell it for the record?
It's Katie, Katie, Ann, Ann, Bryant, Bryant.
All right, Ms. Bryant, a couple of things to keep in mind when you're testifying. The court reporter that's seated in front of me is taking down everything that's being said. So you have to answer with a yes or a no instead of shaking your head. And please don't say uh-huh or uh-uh. If you don't understand a question, please let the lawyer know. If an objection is made, please stop talking immediately and don't answer the question unless I tell you to, all right? And only one person can talk at a time. So wait until the question's finished before you answer. All
Okay.
right?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Bryant, could you tell me how old you are, please?
I am 43,
And what city do you live in?
Minneapolis,
How far did you go in school?
12th grade.
And are you currently employed?
I am.
What do you do for work?
I'm a retail manager.
And are you married?
I am.
And who are you married to?
To Aubrey Wright.
And do you have any children together?
We do.
And what are those? Well, tell me about the children you have together. Who are those children?
Daunte Wright, Diamond Wright, and Destiny Wright.
And could you tell me the ages of your children, please?
Diamond is 19 tomorrow, and Destiny is going to be 15 in January.
And your son Daunte Wright, is he deceased?
Yes.
What was Dante's date of birth?
10/27/2000.
And that makes him your first child with Aubrey, is that right?
Yes.
Did he live with you up until the time of his death?
He did.
And who else lived with you?
Diamond and Destiny.
How old was your son Dante when he died?
He was 20.
And what about his physical condition? Was he in good health?
Yes.
No health issues around the time of his death?
No.
Do you also have some children from a previous relationship?
I do.
And who are they?
Damick Bryant and Dallas Bryant.
And then does your husband have children from a prior relationship as well?
He does.
So how many kids are there in total between you and your husband, Aubrey?
7.
I'm just going to ask you this to get out of the way. Ms. Bryant, do you have a felony conviction for second-degree controlled substance possession?
I do.
I'm going to ask you some more questions about your family, and I'm going to ask you some questions about your son, Daunte Wright. All right?
Okay.
Maybe you could tell the jury a little bit about Daunte when he was a small child. Could you tell the jury about the kinds of things he liked to do for fun?
Yeah. Dante, he loved basketball. He actually started playing at a very young age, all the way through high school. He was funny. He was a jokester. He liked to make everybody laugh. He had a smile that would light up a room. He was amazing. He was my son.
As he grew up, did he get various jobs as well?
He did.
What kind of work did he do?
He was in retail, and then he also worked some fast food.
Was there a place he was working shortly before he died?
He was at Taco Bell and Famous Footwear.
And Famous Footwear, did he work there with his dad?
He did.
And shortly before his death, was he planning to go back to school?
Yes, he actually enrolled in Summit Academy about 2 months before he was killed.
Maybe you could tell the jury what Summit Academy.
I'm not 100% sure what Summit Academy is, but I know that they do like masonry. It's like a program where they train you to be in a career. Carpentry, masonry, and I know there's some other programs that they offer.
Was he planning to pursue any particular career at that point?
He talked about carpentry, but wasn't set on it.
Now, your son, Daunte Wright, does he have children? Are there children that he has of his own?
He does. He has a 1-year-old son.
Okay. And what's his son's name?
Dante Junior.
How old is Dante Junior?
He just turned 2 in July.
He turned 2 in July. When was he born?
He was born July 12th
Okay.
of 2019.
And who is Junior's mother?
Her name is China Whitaker.
Your Honor, at this point, I would plan to offer some Spark of Life photographs. I understand that there's no objection to foundation, but we would offer exhibits 3 and 4 at this time.
Is there any objection to 3 and 4 other than? Okay. Exhibits 3 and 4 will be admitted over defense objections.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I would ask for permission to publish Exhibit 3, please. May we publish?
Yes, Janine. Excuse me.
Ms. Bryant, there should be an image that you can see on your screen. And there, now it's published for the jury. Can you describe to me what's pictured, and describe for the jury what's pictured here?
This picture was last July. And it was Dante Junior's first birthday. We had a barbecue at China's house.
And is this a picture of your son Dante with his son Dante Junior?
Yes.
Did your son Dante have a close relationship with his son?
He did. Dante Jr. was at our house often, at least 3 or 4 times a week, if not more.
And if we could publish Exhibit 4, please. Exhibit 4 is now on the screen. Could you describe for the jury the photo here, please?
This is when we took him out to eat at Teppanyaki Grill after Dante Jr. was born. When Dante Jr. was born, he was only 28 weeks. China was only 28 weeks along, and he was very premature. And he had to stay in the hospital for about 3 or 4 months. So that's when we took Dante out for dinner to congratulate him on his son.
And did your son Dante spend time at the hospital with Dante Jr. while he was there?
He did. The bracelet that's on his hand is actually the hospital band to be able to get into the ICU unit, to be able to see Dante Jr.
And you said that Dante Jr. was in the hospital for 3 or 4 months. Was your son Dante regularly at the hospital during that time period?
He was. He actually was able to feed him his first time with a. You'd have to feed him with a Q-tip. You would dip it in milk. So he was able to do that for his first feeding, and he visited often.
After Dante Jr., was Dante Jr. eventually released from the hospital?
He was.
Did your son Dante continue his relationship with Dante Jr.?
He did.
Tell the jury about that relationship, how you would see him and what they would do together.
He was very proud to be a father. He was also a worried dad just because he was premature about him sleeping, and because he did sleep a lot as a premature baby, and he was really worried about that. He would play with him. He would do everything that a father needs to do for his child. He would. He was an amazing dad.
So, Ms. Bryant, and take your time, please, but I'm going to ask you some questions about April 11th of this year, okay? Could you tell the jury what you were doing that day?
I had Dante Jr. He stayed the night, and it was just an average day. We woke up, he ate, he liked his favorite is the mini chocolate chip pancakes. And he was eating breakfast, watching Cocomelon, and it was time for his nap. That was around 12 something that afternoon.
And did you end up were you watching Dante Jr. By yourself for part of that day?
Yes.
And then did you end up seeing your son Dante later on in the day?
I did.
Could you describe that interaction for the jury, please?
Dante came home in the afternoon, and I was laying Dante Jr. down at the time. He knocked on the bedroom door, and he asked for $50 because he wanted to go get a car wash, and he said he needed gas. And I told him to be really quiet, take it out of my purse. So he took it out of the purse, he leaned over the bed, he gave Dante Jr. a kiss goodbye, and I yelled at him again and told him, please don't wake him up, like I just got him to sleep. And then he left. I told him to make sure he locks the door on his way out.
So you indicated that your son Daunte Wright was on his way to get a car wash and had gotten some money from you for that. What was the car that your son Daunte Wright was driving?
A white 2011 Buick LaCrosse.
And was that Dante's car?
Yes.
And how did that come to be?
It was one of our older vehicles. It was in my other son's name, but we ended up giving it to him as his first car, like 2 weeks before he was killed.
And when you say giving it to him, was he the only one who was driving the car in that 2-week period?
Yeah, he was the only one that had access, that he had a key to the car. It was his.
But was the car still registered to your other son?
It was still registered to my son Dallas.
I'm sorry, I missed the answer to that.
Yes, it was still registered to Dallas.
And what about the insurance on that car?
We did not transfer over insurance yet, so we were going to add it to our current insurance policy.
But that hadn't been done yet?
No.
On April 11th, did you go into that car, have any interaction with Dante in that car?
No, I did not.
And had you been in that car or driven that car, used that car in that 2-week period prior?
No, I have not.
Okay. So getting back to April 11th, after Dante, your son Daunte Wright, took the money to get a car wash, what happened after that?
He called probably about 10 minutes after he left the house, and he asked me what car wash we usually go to, because we have a specific car wash that we go to in Fridley off of University. And I told him that, and he was like, well, isn't there one in Brooklyn Park? And I said, well, yeah, I think it's Mr. Car Wash. And he said he was going to go to that car wash. And I said, okay, don't call back again, because I was really adamant about Junior not waking up.
And is Junior what you call Dante's son, Dante Junior?
Yes, Dante Junior.
And was your concern just not waking up Junior?
Yes, not waking Junior up.
So after that call where you discussed which car wash to go to, was there a second call after that?
There was.
And about how much later was that?
Oh my gosh, maybe 10, 15 minutes later.
And what was the nature of that second call?
He called me to tell me that he has been pulled over. And I asked him, I said, for what? And he said that the police officer said that he had an air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror. So at that time I told him, I said, well, you should take it down. And he said he already did. And then he said that they were also asking about insurance information. And I told him to, when the police officer gets back to the window, to please hand him the phone so I could explain the insurance and give him my insurance policy, that we haven't added it yet.
When you talked to your son, Dante, how did he sound to you during that call?
He sounded nervous, scared. He asked, if he was in trouble. I said, no, you haven't done anything wrong. And he just sounded really nervous. But I reassured him that it would be okay.
Take your time. When he placed these calls to you, how were you receiving these calls? Was it through a cell phone network or some other way?
It was through Facebook Messenger. It was voice calls. He didn't have phone service at the time, so he was calling through Facebook Messenger.
And so after you had this initial conversation with your son, Dante, about wanting to talk to the officers, what happened after that?
I heard the police officer come back up to the window and he asked Dante to step out of the vehicle. And Dante asked, for what? Am I in trouble? And I heard the officer say, I need you to just put the phone down, step out of the vehicle, and I'll let you know as soon as you step out of the vehicle. And then at that time, I heard the phone either being placed on an object, whether it was dropped on the floor or placed on the dash, I'm not sure, but I could hear the phone being put down. And then I heard – I heard the officer telling Dante, no. And I heard Dante say, no, I'm not. Don't. It sounded like he said, don't run. Dante said, no, I'm not. And then I heard them say, somebody tell somebody to hang up the phone. And then that's all I heard.
Did the phone disconnect?
It did.
After the phone disconnected, then you heard what you described. What happened next?
I was panicked. I called back. It seemed like 100 times, but I believe it was probably maybe 4 or 5 times, and I kept calling. So finally, I FaceTimed. I would say I don't know how much time lapsed, maybe a minute or two. And then a female answered the phone because it was FaceTime. She was screaming. And I was like, what's wrong? And she said that they shot him. And she faced the phone towards the driver's seat. And my son was laying there. He was unresponsive, and he looked dead. And then I heard somebody say, hang up the phone again. And it disconnected again.
So after that phone call disconnected, or you said it was a video call at that point, so you got to see your son Dante. What did you do after that video call?
I grabbed my grandson and I called my husband because he wasn't home. I said they just shot Dante. And he said, what? And he said that they just shot him. And I said they just shot him. The police officer just shot Dante. They have no clue where they are. And I hung up with him. And then I called 911 because I needed to find out where my son was.
And did you, in fact, make that call to 911?
I did.
What did you learn when you made that call?
They transferred me to a few different police stations. I said my son was just shot by a police officer and I need to know where he is. And they transferred me to, I think it was Brooklyn Park or Brooklyn Center. I don't remember which police station or which 911 operator answered, but they gave me an address of 63rd and Catherine. And I put it in my GPS, and I grabbed my grandson, and I got into my vehicle, and my neighbors heard me screaming because I like fell to the ground because I didn't know what to do. So she helped me up. She put us into the vehicle, and then she drove us to 63rd and Catherine
And
in
this is
Brooklyn Center.
a neighbor who drove you and Dante Junior?
Yes.
And about how long did it take for you to get to that location?
It seemed like forever. I felt like we weren't getting there fast enough, but probably 7-8 minutes, maybe a little bit longer.
And is that where you went to that location at 63rd and Catherine?
Yes.
And what did you see when you got there?
So we were driving down Brooklyn Boulevard, coming up to 63rd, and there was a lot of traffic, a lot. So I got out of the car because I could see, when we were waiting to turn, I could see all the police lights probably about 6 blocks down. And I got out of the car and I started running towards Catherine because the traffic wasn't moving fast enough. And then the car that I was in ended up catching up with me, and I got back in for another 2 blocks. And then I got out again and ran the last 2 blocks to where all the yellow tape was. And then I went under the yellow tape because I seen a a car crash, and I noticed it was my son's car. And then in the front of his car is where he was laying.
Did you see your son's body on the ground?
I did.
So what did you do when you got to that area?
I was so distraught. I didn't know what was happening. I just got off the phone and they said he shot him, but I seen a car crash. I was asking questions. I didn't want to believe that that was my son laying there on the ground, but I could tell it was him because of his tennis shoes.
And when you say you could tell it was him because of his tennis shoes, was it only part of his body that was visible to you?
They had a white sheet over him.
But you recognized his shoes?
Yeah.
Your Honor, at this time I would offer Exhibit 6. Again, I understand that there's no foundational objection to that exhibit.
And what is Exhibit 6?
It's a video of Ms. Bryant arriving on scene.
Okay. Is there no objection? Exhibit 6 will be admitted into evidence, and you may publish, counsel.
Thank you.
Hi.
Touch me, I swear, fuck you.
I can't.
My father. No.
I don't know anything. Who are you?
I am Katie Bryant, his mom. I want to see you now. Please.
Wait, just
He's over 20.
I don't know what's going on.
I know what's going on.
What
He
happened?
FaceTime live.
ma'am, I'm gonna get you somebody to talk to. I'm gonna get you someone to talk to. Okay? But I just can't have you going over there right now, okay?
Ma'am, my name is Mark. My name is Mark. What is your name? Can I have you sit on the ledge here?
You guys shot him.
I
Why?
don't know. I wasn't here.
Why? Because he had a warrant. Are you fucking serious? I was here. I watched it.
Can you just sit down? Tell me what's going on, because I wasn't here.
No. Where's the girl that was in the car with him? You guys made her hang up Facebook Live so you could kill my son. That's pretty pathetic.
What is your name? What is your name?
My name is Katie Bryant. My son's name is Daunte Wright. You guys already know that.
I don't. Katie Brian.
It was a high-speed
sorry.
chase.
Bryant.
How?
And then what's your son's name?
Daunte Wright. It was not a high-speed chase. You guys shot him in a pullover traffic.
I didn't
guys
do
know.
anything, ma'am.
Yeah, you did. He was laying in his front seat dead. His girlfriend Facebooked me. How did his car get smashed?
What's his name again?
Daunte Wright.
Right? Is it W-R-I-G-H?
W-I-G-H-T.
Okay. Is it Katie
Yeah.
Bryant?
Yeah.
All right. Just wait a second here, ma'am.
You just sit down, please.
Ma'am.
You sit down. Okay, so I wasn't here. You said there was a traffic stop and they shot
They
him?
pulled him over, and he said, Mom, do you have a warrant? I said, oh, no. They asked him to get out of the car. He got out of the car, and they said, wait, stop. They said, stop. And then she goes, and then they shot him, and he fell back in the seat. And he was in the driver's seat, and she said, they shot him. And I said, what do you mean they shot him? She said, yeah. And then they told her to hang up, and that was it. I don't know nothing else. So I had to call you guys to find out where this happened.
I really don't know more because I just came because I heard there was trouble.
Why is my car smashed up?
I don't know.
I don't know.
This deputy here wasn't. We weren't here, but.
I'm
Is he alive?
I do not know the condition. I don't
Are you
know.
guys serious? What are you talking to me for then?
I'm gonna find out.
We're gonna find out, but we have to wait and find out who's involved and who's in charge, and get you in contact with the people that know what's
Tell me
going
your name
on.
so I can tell them who I'm talking to.
I'm gonna start exchanging.
We are also trying to figure out what's going on.
Stop. Thank you. Ms. Bryant, I know that was tough to watch. Can you just describe for the jury what you were feeling when you arrived on scene?
I was praying that that wasn't him laying on the ground. that it was the person in the other car. And that he was in the back of a cop car. I was so confused, angry, scared. It was the worst day of my life. And
You said that you were praying that it wasn't him, but in your heart, having recognized those shoes, did you feel like you knew?
I knew, but I didn't want to know. I was biting the insides of my cheeks. I still have scars on the insides of my cheeks because I thought it was a dream. And if I bit the insides of my cheeks, that I would wake up. But I didn't wake up.
You know, in the video you described that you were there and that you watched it. What did you mean by that?
That when I FaceTimed back, I was on the phone prior, so I heard the conversation between the officer and Dante before he had to get out of the car. And that after, when I FaceTimed the female that was in the car, I could see what happened, and she said what happened, that she was shot by the police officer that was there at the time.
That he was shot, your son Dante?
My son Dante was shot, yes.
And you had mentioned, I think, Facebook Live, but is that video call, the FaceTime or video messenger call that you are describing?
Yes, Messenger Live.
Okay. About how long did you stay in that area after this?
Hours, 8, 9 hours. I felt like I couldn't leave because I begged them to take his body off the ground. I didn't want to leave until he left.
At some point, did your husband join you as well?
He did.
And did someone come to pick up Dante Junior, your grandson who was with you?
Yes, China ended up coming to get him.
You said that you waited on scene until they removed your son Dante's body. Were you ever given an opportunity to approach or see him close up on that day?
No, I wasn't.
Excuse me, I object to that. Not relevant.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
No, I wasn't able to approach him at all.
And what was going through your head while you were waiting for all those hours?
That I wanted to go comfort my baby. I wanted to hold him. And I wanted to protect him because that's what mothers do. You protect your children. You make sure that they're safe.
Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further. May we have a brief sidebar?
Yes. Okay, Mr. Gray?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Bryant. I have a few questions. With respect to the automobile, the Buick, it was in Dallas's name, is that right?
Yes.
And how long had it been in Dallas's name?
For a few years since we've owned it.
Now, remember how many years by we owned it? Would that be you?
Well, yes, I drove it in the beginning, like years ago when we purchased it.
Okay.
But my son ended up putting it in his name after that.
And how old is Dallas?
Dallas is 24.
All right, so he'd be 3-4 years older than your son?
Yes.
And you testified that you're close to your son, is that right?
I'm close to all my children, yes.
Okay, but you also testified that you're close to your son, correct?
Yes.
All right. And at that time, did you have car insurance on this Buick?
We did not.
All right. And with respect to your son, Daunte, did you know whether or not he had a driver's license?
I did know that he did not have a driver's license.
You knew he didn't have one, correct?
Yes. Yep.
And you knew his license was suspended, correct?
I did not know that.
Well, did he ever have a driver's license?
No.
So he's 20 years old with no driver's license. Fair statement?
Yep.
And were you also aware of his marijuana usage?
I was not.
Did you ever go inside the Buick while he had it parked at your house?
I did not.
And did you know that he had a warrant for his arrest?
I did not.
How did you know when you ran up to the police that he had a warrant? You said, my son was shot for a warrant.
Because that's what somebody on the side of the street said when I was running up to them.
You know who said that?
I don't know. There's a lot of people out there that day.
And you testified that Daunte was staying at your house?
He was.
The 2 weeks prior to his death, was he staying there every night?
Not every night.
And how many nights of the 2 weeks before that did he actually stay at your house?
If I had to give an estimate, probably 4 or 5 nights out of the week.
And with respect to his girlfriend, how long was he dating her, did you know?
Only for a few weeks.
A week?
A few weeks.
Or 2 weeks? Or was it a few weeks?
To give an estimate, a few. I'm not sure.
Did you ever meet her?
I did not personally meet her, no.
And when he arrived at your house that day, he wanted $50 for gas and a car wash, correct?
Correct.
And she did not come into the house with him, correct?
She did not.
You gave a statement to law enforcement on April 15th, 2021. Do you remember that?
I do.
And have you reviewed that statement before you came to testify today?
I did.
And it is true, is it not, that when you went to that statement, you had 3 lawyers, or 2 lawyers at least, actually 3 lawyers, that represented you at the time. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Outside scope and irrelevant.
Okay, sidebar, please.
Okay, any objection is overruled.
On April 15, 2021, Ms. Bryant, you were interviewed by law enforcement, and you had an attorney named Jeff Storms representing you, correct?
Correct.
And you had an attorney named Adam Marceline with the Ben Crump law firm, is that right?
Yes.
And you had another attorney, Christopher Scott, with Newmark and Storms, is that right?
Yes.
And those are the three lawyers that were representing you back then?
Yes.
And you were contemplating a civil lawsuit?
Yes.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Is there anything else?
Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you. You may step down. The state may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state would call Officer Anthony Luckey.
You might just need one moment for the witness, Your Honor.
Your Honor, he is on his way down. So.
Please come forward and stand behind the witness chair. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully respond to questions?
I do.
Please have a seat. And officer, you may remove your mask and state your full name and spell it.
Yep. First name will be Anthony Troy Luckey, Anthony. Middle name Troy. Last name Luckey.
Just a couple reminders. Only one person can talk at a time. Wait until the question's finished before you answer. If an objection is made, stop talking immediately and don't answer the question unless I tell you to. Okay? If you don't understand the question, ask for clarification. All right?
Yes.
And yes or no answers, please, instead of shaking your head.
Yes.
Counsel?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, officer. The cautions the judge just gave you, if you catch me trying to correct you, that's just why, so we can get all your testimony down, okay?
Should I ask you to spell your full name?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Obviously, you're dressed in uniform today. Can you tell the jurors what you do for a living?
So, for a living, I am a police officer with the Brooklyn Center Police Department, and I've been employed there since February 2021.
And was it your first job as a police officer?
My first employment as a police officer, it will be technically my third employment as a police officer.
So how long have you worked as a police officer altogether?
Altogether, it would be about a total of 3 years.
And we'll come back to that and cover that a little bit more, but I want to back up a little bit. How old are you today?
I am 31 years old.
And can you tell the jurors, just not address, but the town where you grew up?
I grew up in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota.
And you now work Brooklyn Center, correct?
Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, both the same areas. So yeah.
The cities share a border even, right?
Correct.
And where did you go to high school at?
I attended Park Center Senior High School.
And is that kind of a shared with Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center?
There is a Brooklyn Center High School, and there is a Brooklyn Park High School. So some people who did live in Brooklyn Center also attended Park Center High School as well. So
when did you first start thinking about becoming a police officer?
I thought about becoming a police officer when I was about 7, 8 years old, living in the city of Brooklyn Park.
And why? What made you start thinking about it?
For me, it was just living in the community, seeing how crime was going on in Brooklyn Park, seeing how officers for the Brooklyn Park Police Department responded to calls and helped the community. So for me, it was always a calling, wanting to help other people, wanted to do good in the world.
And you could do that by being a police officer?
Yes.
And so what was your first experience working with the police department?
My first experience would have been with a smaller agency up north in Mille Lacs County, Band of Ojibwe Police Department. Very fast-paced, good agency. Fortunately for me, I moved on.
Let me back you up just a little bit, because I was going to go even farther back than that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because you didn't work for the law enforcement agency, but volunteered, right? You were an explorer.
Oh, correct. Yes.
Okay.
Going backwards, yes. Growing up, when I was 15, I started as a police explorer with the Brooklyn Center Police Department, and I continued to do that until I was 18 in 2008.
And so when you were an explorer, what kinds of things did you do?
So as an explorer, it's kind of like a youth program where it is a youth program where you learn the basic ways of being in law enforcement. So you learn what it is like doing the job. You compete in competitions such as crime scene investigations, traffic stops, and so on. So every year you would do a competition. Back in the day it was Breezy Point Resort up north in Minnesota. And you would compete against other agencies as well.
Did you enjoy it?
I did, yes.
Did it make you want to be a police officer more or less?
Yes, it gave me the wanting to drive to continue my career and to continue becoming a police officer.
While you were an explorer for the Brooklyn Center Police Department, did you get to know Kim Potter?
Yes, I did.
How so?
I did see Officer Potter around in the building when we would have monthly meetings. There were times that I would see her coming into our meetings every now and then. I would see her in passing while we're doing trainings and stuff like that.
So you knew who she was?
Yes.
And were there ever, did you have much involvement with her, or was it just seeing her around?
It was obviously, getting to know the officers in the agency. A lot of the officers, commanders, chiefs that are currently there were present when I was an explorer. So coming and passing and, saying hi, a lot of them would come and introduce themselves. Even some would help out with police explorers as well, being role players.
And did you recall whether Officer Potter at the time did that?
I don't recall specifically with Officer Potter, but I do just recall seeing her a lot around at the agency.
So that's while you were a teenager, correct?
Correct, yes.
So then, I assume at some point you graduated from high school, correct?
Yes, 2008.
And tell us then, what was your next step in education to be a police officer?
So my next step was to go to college, which I did. I attended Alexandria Technical College for a year, which was up north. I decided to move back down to the cities, where I continued classes at North Hennepin Technical College, and then I transferred over to Rasmussen College, where I completed my degree in law enforcement and also did classes for a 4-year degree as well.
And so you have to help us here. Do you end up with a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree? How does that work?
I did complete my 2-year degree.
Okay. And that's all that's required, at least by Brooklyn Center at the time, correct?
Yes.
And so that's what you needed to do for your education to be a police officer?
Yes.
And also a skills program that you have to do to be a police officer?
Yes. So when you do your 2-year degree or your 4, there is a skills program that you do go through, and that is more of the not necessarily the book work, but it's the hands-on work. So firearms training, use of force, crime scene investigations, the more of the fun stuff. You go to driving school, etc.
And so then the next, I think you started telling us earlier, the first job you got in law enforcement was where?
So the first job I was ever hired with was Mille Lacs Tribal Police Department, Band of Ojibwe, and that was up north in Minnesota.
And how long did you work there?
I was employed there for a total of 3 months.
And did you do a field training officer program there?
Yes, I did have a field training program there as well.
Since you're the first officer to take the stand in the case, could you just explain for the jurors basically what a field training officer program is?
Yes. So a field training program, initially when you are hired with the police department in the state of Minnesota, you go through a program of working with a officer. Typically there's 4 phases. Your first phase is basically learning on a ride-along, learning how they do, traffic stops, how they handle calls, how they deal with people, sort of getting a feel for the geography and the basics of starting on the road. It's basically getting you ready to be able to work in that city's environment, if that makes sense. Gradually down the road, moving on through these phases, you get switched different field training officers that will give you an understanding of how they do things differently and their experiences as well. And with that, moving on through the field training phases, you are expected to be able to show and prove that you can do the job on your own.
And so at some point you left the Mille Lacs Tribal Police Department, correct?
Yes.
And why was that?
Due to an issue with my training with geography, I was let go.
Okay. So and by geography you mean learning the jurisdiction?
Correct, yes.
When you get a call to a place, you got to know where to go.
Correct, yes, which is important.
Yep. And so then where did you work after that?
So after that, I was hired with the city of Gaylord in Sibley County, July of 2019, where I went through the same field training program and stayed there until February of 2021.
Okay. And how big is the city of Gaylord when you were working there?
The city of Gaylord is about 3,500 people.
And so with the Gaylord Police Department, did you go through a field training officer program there as well?
Yes.
And did you complete that program there?
Yes.
And then you mentioned in February of this year that you changed jobs, correct?
Correct, yes.
And so where did you go in February of this year?
February of this year, 2021, I applied for the Brooklyn Center Police Department, which was the agency where I've always wanted to work. I went through the hiring process, background process, psych evaluation, and a physical agility test, and got hired with Brooklyn Center Police Department, I believe February 16th of 2021.
Why did you want to apply at the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
For me, it's personal. The reason why with Brooklyn Center Police Department and the city itself is just because I grew up there. all my life. I know the type of, the community, the people that live in that community. The streets of Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, it's basically being home.
Did you think you could succeed as a police officer there?
Yes.
And you're still currently employed there, correct?
Yes, I am currently employed.
Now, you are licensed as a police officer in Minnesota?
Yes.
And again, since you're kind of the first police officer, can you just describe, what is the licensing authority for police officers?
You mean the Minnesota Post Board? Is that what you're referring to?
Yep. Who do you get your license from?
Yep. So when you are licensed as a police officer, you are licensed with the Minnesota Police Boards Association, which is the Minnesota Post Board, which is our licensing center, or our licensing issuers basically in the state of Minnesota.
And so POST, I think, means Peace Officer Standards and Training, right?
Correct.
And so you have to apply there to get your license, meet certain requirements before they can give you a license, correct?
Yes.
And when did you first obtain your police officer license in Minnesota?
My first obtaining of a license was January of 2018.
And you've kept that license ever since?
No. The license did go inactive. So every time you move an agency, my license was activated the January of 2018. Moved over to transferred to Gaylord Police Department, where it was then reactivated, and then I was having my license held through that agency.
So all the time you've been working as a police officer, you've had an active post license?
Yes.
All right. And when you worked at the Gaylord Police Department, did they provide training to you?
Yes.
And did you carry a taser there?
Yes.
And did you get certified to carry the taser before carrying it?
Yes.
And do you recall what model taser you used when you were at Gaylord?
At the City of Gaylord Police Department, it was, I believe, the X26P.
And when you went to the Brooklyn Center Police Department, did you get a taser to carry there when you started?
Yes.
And at some point, did the Brooklyn Center Police Department change models of taser?
Yes, at one point they did. When I started, it was X26P.
And what did they change to?
And then we transitioned to the Taser 7.
And when you were at Brooklyn Center, did you have to do some training for the Taser 7?
Yes.
Do you recall when that training was?
Not the exact date. I do want to say it was the first week of May. I believe probably May 3rd or May 7th.
Okay. Do you think it was March?
March. Sorry, March.
Yeah.
March 3rd would be actually the exact date.
Okay. And did you also get training like on the use of force with Gaylord?
Yes.
And the use of force with Brooklyn Center as well?
Yes.
And did that training, through that training, were you taught about different ways or places to wear the taser?
Yes.
When you came to Brooklyn Center, was there already a policy in place about where to carry your taser?
Yes.
And what was that policy?
The policy was opposite side of your duty firearm.
So if you have your duty firearm on your right side, you had to carry your taser on the left side.
Yes.
Why was that there was a rule about that?
For Taser's policy and our policy, it's so that way officers do not get their firearms confused with their tasers.
And when you were wearing your taser for the Brooklyn Center Police Department, you wore it on the other side, correct?
Yes.
Did you use a straight draw or a cross draw? Do you know what I mean?
When I first started, I used a cross draw.
And what does that mean? Can you describe that for the jurors, please?
Yes, so a cross draw is I'm a right-handed person. I carry my Glock 17 on my right side. So when I go for my taser, to grab my taser, I reach across my waist on the other side of my belt, and I am able to grab my taser with my right hand, which would be my dominant hand.
And so if you were to grab it with the other hand, what kind of draw is that called?
And if I use the opposite hand, it would be a reaction side straight draw.
And are you still wearing it that way?
I currently am wearing a straight draw with my reaction side.
So you've switched.
Well, yeah, yes, with my reaction side hand.
Why did you switch?
For me, that's just how I train with, is to just use my taser with my left hand only instead of my dominant hand.
So for some time you wore it as a cross draw, right?
Yes,
And then at some point you switched to a straight draw.
correct.
And why did you, I'm not sure I'm clear about why you switched at that point to a straight draw.
Yes, so initially when I did start at Brooklyn Center Police Department, I do believe there was a straight draw holster offered to me. Down the road, I didn't prefer to have a cross draw, so I requested it to obtain a straight draw holster, but it was not available. So when we transitioned to the Taser 7, I made sure to stick with using a cross draw holster instead on my left side.
When you went to the Taser 7, you requested a straight draw or a cross draw?
Straight draw holster, yes.
So that's where the switch occurred.
Yes.
All right. Sorry if they beat that, but wanted to make sure I understood. And when you were working at Gaylord Police Department, did you ever have to draw your taser?
Yes.
And what about at Brooklyn Center? Did you ever draw your taser while you were working at Brooklyn Center?
Yes.
And have you ever actually fired a taser?
No.
When you were working both in Gaylord and for Brooklyn Center, and part of the training that you went through on your taser, did you have to perform draws of the taser?
Yes.
Can you describe that for the jurors, please?
The use of force training that we do with Brooklyn Center Police Department is when we go through the taser training, we go through a PowerPoint for like a period or amount of time, and then we do hands-on training with the tasers that we carry on duty. So with that being said, we do get some targets. We practice deploying cartridges at these targets, aiming for the target areas. Sometimes, or not sometimes, when I first initially started, it was, doing a little bit of running, jumping, getting the blood pumping, and then deploying this taser at the target.
What's the point of making you run and jump and get the blood flowing?
Just to get the body used to and trained with being under stress while taking out your taser and deploying it.
And you did that training, did you say, at Brooklyn Center?
Yes.
So when you came to Brooklyn Center, you started a field training program there, correct?
Yes.
Did you also have to do some training separate from the other officers because you were new?
Yes, and that would have been pre-service training.
Okay. And is that where you did this type of taser training?
Yes.
And do you understand now as a Brooklyn Center police officer that that type of training where they get you to think under pressure is something that all officers go through?
That is something that all officers should go through and do, yes.
And was that true when you were at Gaylord as well?
We did do the same type of taser training. I do not believe we did any agility, running or jumping.
I want to turn specifically to now April 11th of 2021. Were you working that day?
Yes.
And what was your shift that day?
So my shift on April 11th was a day shift. I was still on in my field training program, and I was working with Officer Potter at the time.
And You recall what your shift was?
My shift was the day shift, which I was working a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Do you recall what day of the week that was?
That would have been a Sunday.
And so you were working, well, let me ask you this way. Were you still in the FTO program with Brooklyn Center at the time?
Yes.
You talked earlier about some phases of the FTO program.
Yes.
Do you recall on April 11th where in that process you were?
I was in phase 2, which would have been the second month.
So is it phase 2 of how many?
Typically, it's 14 shifts. On that day, I believe it was either my 4th or 5th shift on my second phase.
Okay, so how many phases though are there?
There are 4 total.
Okay,
You can get extended, but there's 4.
so you were early part of the second of 4 phases.
Yes.
And so at that point in the process, what are your responsibilities as the trainee, versus the trainer? Explain that for the jury, what that relationship is supposed to be at that stage.
Mm-hmm. So second phase is typically you're progressed from the first phase. So it's percentage-wise, I'd have to say you're not necessarily doing 50% of the work, but you're doing about 30% of the work. You are involving yourself with talking to people on these calls that you're going to, doing some of the paperwork that you're assigned to do on the calls. So.
And what's the role of the FTO then at that time, the trainer?
Yep, and the role of the field training officer at that time is typically the same as it always is, which is to instruct you, read over your work, monitor you, make sure they're grading pretty much your errors and your the things that you do well in. So.
And you indicated that Kim Potter was your FTO that day?
Yes.
Had you worked with her as an FTO before that day?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how many times?
I would say about 4 times. I believe it would have been my 5th shift. I don't recall, but it could have been 4 shifts prior.
And so then they're with you that entire day, correct?
Yes.
And then at the end of the day, they write up a report on how it went that day, correct?
Yes.
And at some point, that feedback gets to a supervisor who's overlooking your FTO program, correct?
Yes.
And so all those shifts are 12-hour shifts?
Yes.
Makes for a long day, doesn't it? And when you're in that FTO program, is there something you refer to as a book or some goals you have to meet?
Yes. So trainees that are on the field training program have a book, binder, some might call it the Bible, and there are a set of training tasks in there that you are expected to have completed on each phase. First phase could be as simple as writing a traffic citation, writing a report, and then the second phase is more into investigations possibly. So
prior to that day, in your work at Gaylord and at Brooklyn Center, had you made stops of vehicles before?
Yes.
Had you made arrests before?
Yes.
Had you taken people into custody who had warrants before?
Yes.
And had you done that at Brooklyn Center during the FTO process? Those things?
Yes.
And so this day, that's what you set out to do with Mr. Wright, correct? To arrest him?
Yes.
So this wasn't the first time that you had arrested somebody, certainly.
No.
And at some point, as I mentioned, you did stop a vehicle being driven by a person you later identified as Daunte Wright, correct?
Yes.
And did you know Mr. Wright?
No.
Did you know anybody he was related to, or any family members, anything like that?
No.
All right. So if you could just tell the jurors, when you first encountered this vehicle, what drew your attention?
Yep, so when I first encountered this vehicle, myself and Officer Potter were traveling southbound on Zane Avenue, coming up to the intersection of 63rd Avenue North. I was approaching the intersection, which was a stoplight, and it was a red light. In front of me was a white Buick that had its right blinker on in the left turning lane. For a brief second, stopped, waited, and then it went. It turned eastbound on 63rd Avenue North.
So if I could just interrupt for just a second, it's in the left turn lane with the right blinker on, and you said just for a second, or what happened?
Yes, for a brief moment, it was a hesitation with making the left turn.
Okay. But did it then make the left turn?
Yes.
And what did you do?
After that, I continued following the vehicle, immediately ran the registration of the license plate, which brings back the owner's information, the registered owner's information. I also, when I ran the plate, I could see that the vehicle had expired registration tabs on the plate as well, which I believe came back from January of 2021.
So just a quick tutorial on this. As you're following it, you're able to enter the license plate in a computer and get more information on that plate?
Yes, I used my computer, which is in our squad cars. I was able to use a program that is connected through the state, where I am able to run that license plate and get that information from about the registered owner, and pretty much any information that's related to that vehicle.
And when you ran that registration, what did you find out about the plate?
The plate had expired registration.
And did you learn the vehicle owner's name?
Yes, it came back to a Dallas.
Do you remember the last name?
I don't recall. I do remember there was a Bryant in there. I don't know if that was the last name or the middle name.
And after this incident, did you write a report about it?
Yes, I did.
And if that report contained the name that you learned from that, would it refresh your recollection to look briefly at your report?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness? I'm not sure how we're going to do this, but for the purpose of refreshing his recollection.
Yes.
D'Amico.
So, Officer Luckey, having reviewed your report, does that refresh your recollection about the owner's name that you learned at that time?
Yes.
And what was it?
Dallas, D'Amico, Bryant.
So Bryant was the last name.
Yes.
Okay. Then, while you were doing this, where were you in the squad car?
I was the officer driving that entire day, while Officer Potter was in the front passenger seat.
Okay. So as you're running that information, she's there next to you.
Yes.
And so then did you continue to follow the vehicle?
Yes, eastbound on 63rd Avenue.
Did you observe anything else significant to you at that time as a police officer about the vehicle?
Yes, I did observe that there was a air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror as well.
And why is that significant to a police officer? Is that really a violation of the law?
Technically, yes, it is.
Okay. A fairly common violation of the law to have things hanging from a rearview mirror?
It's a common violation of the law, yes.
I suspect there's a lot of people right now thinking, I didn't know that was against the law, right?
Maybe.
Fairly common to see.
It's, yes.
And so then what did you decide to do?
So after running the license plate, observing the expired registration tabs, knowing the information that I seen with the left turn, with the right blinker on, I decided to radio over to the Hennepin County Dispatch, which notifies them that I am going to initiate a traffic stop of that vehicle, which at that time I turned on my emergency traffic lights on my squad car, which signals the individual driving around me or in front of me, behind me, that they are emergency lights, which are red and blue.
And that's what you do to make a formal stop of a vehicle, correct?
Yes.
And so you said you notified Hennepin Dispatch. Can you just explain why a Brooklyn Center police officer calls Hennepin County Dispatch?
In Hennepin County, we do have dispatchers that we relay information to, and they relay information back to us. So when we make traffic stops, there's possibilities that things can go wrong, and it's important that dispatch knows what's going on and that they're aware that we're having contact with people on traffic stops or on the street.
So that's your main dispatcher with Hennepin County.
Yes.
And did you also use a separate means to notify other Brooklyn Center officers?
Yes, I did. I also turned to our second channel, which is a channel that Brooklyn Center Police Department uses, which is an car-to-car channel. Only us officers for Brooklyn Center Police Department can monitor that channel. So after I made my initial contact with the Hennepin County Dispatch over Channel 1, I switched over to Channel 2 and requested that another officer come to assist me on my traffic stop.
And why did you want another officer to come and assist?
Given just what I knew from what I observed and my intuition, I just decided to have an officer assist me on the traffic stop.
When you're working as an officer, and you are conducting a traffic stop, or you hear another officer conducting a traffic stop, is it common to just swing by anyway or offer backup anyway?
Yes, I do. Generally, if someone's making a traffic stop, I generally try to, I may not necessarily go to their traffic stop, but I do float that way, which is drive to their area in case anything does happen.
But here you specifically requested it, correct?
Yes.
At the time, did you know how many occupants there were in the vehicle?
Yes, I can only see that there were 2 occupants in the vehicle, one in the driver's seat and one in the front passenger seat.
When you send that request out, do you get any response? Anybody tell you they were going to respond?
Yes, when I sent the response out over Channel 2, Sergeant Johnson responded back on the radio stating that he was en route.
Now you mentioned Sergeant Johnson. Does he have some supervisory role for you that day?
Yes, he was the sergeant on shift that day.
So you're working with an FTO, but there's also a sergeant working that day.
Yes.
Right? So is Sergeant Johnson, in that sense, a supervisor for you?
Yes, he is a supervisor.
He responded that he was going to back you up?
Yes.
Did he indicate when that would be?
I don't recall. I just know that he said that he would be en route.
Okay. And did the vehicle then in fact stop?
Yep, so when I initiated my traffic lights, I observed the vehicle slowly stopping in front, well, it actually made a complete stop in front of a driveway to a church on 63rd Avenue North. At that time, I got on my PA, which is a microphone. Basically, you speak through it, and people can hear you outside the vehicle. I gave a command over the PA to move forward due to the fact that there was a vehicle trying to exit that parking driveway where he stopped at.
Your Honor, at this time I'm going to offer Exhibit 1, which is an overhead photograph of the scene. I understand the defense is not going to have an objection, but we will.
No objection.
Exhibit 1 will be admitted into evidence. And you may publish.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I'm going to put Exhibit 1, my trusty coworker is going to put Exhibit 1 up here on the screen for you. Do you see that in front of you?
Yes.
And do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
And what area is that?
This is the area of 63rd and Orchard Lane or Orchard Avenue where the incident took place.
Now, obviously this photograph was not taken on April 11th because there are actually leaves on the trees and green grass, right?
Yes.
But otherwise this depicts the layout of that area, the roads, the streets in that area.
Yes.
Now, there should be right in front of you, I hope, one of these little styluses. And if it would help explain to the jury, you can use the stylus to actually write on the screen as you're explaining it. But if you could please, for the jury, point out which street here is 63rd Avenue.
Yes, so this street will be 63rd Avenue North.
And what directions does that street run?
Travels east and west.
And is that kind of a busy street in the area?
Yes, it is.
And why is that?
It's a main road. 63rd will take you east pretty much through Brooklyn Center, half of Brooklyn Center, and then it'll travel all the way west, going to Crystal, pretty much to 81.
And so there is on here well, you drew a line on here. Can you just describe for the jurors which direction is east and which is west?
Correct. So east, and then we're going to have west.
Got it. So you were traveling east behind this vehicle on 63rd, correct?
Correct, yes.
And if you could, for the jurors, indicate where the vehicle first pulled up and had this problem of blocking the driveway.
So the initial stop of the white Buick would have been the entrance right there, and eventually I got on my PA and he made his second stop right there.
And so you directed him to move up, and he in fact did that.
Yes.
And once you stopped behind him at that location, you'll notice on here, just above your little smaller red X, there's a blue box with an X in it. Is that the approximate location of the final stop?
Yes.
Okay. So then once the vehicles came to a stop, what did you do?
Vehicle came to a complete stop. At this time, I exited the vehicle, or exited my squad car, and approached the vehicle on the driver's side door.
And where was Officer Potter while you were doing that?
I believe Officer Potter was still stationed inside the squad car.
Okay. And did you then have a conversation with the driver?
Yes.
And was the window open? Did the driver open the window?
Yes.
And when you approached, what happened next?
When I approached the window, I requested a driver's license and proof of insurance from the driver who I identified as Daunte Wright. Also, while speaking with him, immediately I observed, well, first, before that even got to that point, I explained to him the reason for the stop, which was for the air freshener, and then I also began asking him about the expired tabs.
And what did he indicate to you about the expired tabs?
He stated that the vehicle belonged to his brother and that he just bought the vehicle from his brother, I believe.
Did he give you his brother's name?
What was that?
Did he tell you his brother's name?
Yes.
What was the name?
Eventually, he said it was Dallas D'Amico Bryant.
So it matched with what you had learned by running the plate?
Yes.
Okay. When you approached the vehicle, did you see then how many people were in the car?
Yes.
How many people were in the car?
2.
So we know you're talking with a male driver. That person subsequently, you got identified as Daunte Wright, correct?
Yes.
Who else was in the car? Or if you just describe that person.
There was also a female in the front passenger seat, and I have no idea what her name was from that stop or during that traffic stop.
And did she communicate with you at all?
No, she did not communicate. However, she did have comments in the car when I was having contact with Dante. Later.
Okay. But initially when you're talking with Dante, she didn't speak to you at all?
No.
Okay. And when you were speaking with Mr. Wright, did you notice anything else that concerned you?
Yes. So I did notice a odor of marijuana smell coming from the vehicle, emitting from the window when the window was down. Also, in the vehicle, in the middle console, I observed marijuana residue, which was pretty much scattered around on the middle console.
And by residue, what do you mean?
Marijuana residue, if I had to explain it, I mean, it's shake. It's basically marijuana residue, leaves scattered around.
Not like a bag of marijuana?
No, it wasn't a bag, no.
And so you asked the driver, Mr. Wright, for some information, correct?
Yes.
And did he give you his full name?
Yes, he did.
And his date of birth?
Yes.
And did he give you his address?
Yes.
When he gave you the address, were you familiar with that address?
No. I know where the address was, but I wasn't familiar with that particular address.
And where was that address roughly? I mean, obviously you're telling us, I don't know exactly, but is it in Brooklyn Center? Is it in that area?
Yes, it is in Brooklyn Center. I do not recall the actual house number. I just know that it was on Northway Drive.
And that would be in Brooklyn Center?
Yes.
Okay. And did you also ask him for a phone number?
Yes, I did.
And did he give you that?
Yes.
Okay. And and I think you may have already told us you asked him for a driver's license.
Yes, I did.
And what did he say?
He stated that he did not have a driver's license.
And what else did you ask him for?
I also asked him for proof of insurance, and he stated that he just bought the vehicle and he did not, or I believe I don't recall, I believe said he was looking for the insurance.
And as to the expired tabs, did he tell you anything about that?
Yes, that was about the same time when he also explained that the vehicle was it used to be his brother's car, and that he bought it from his brother, Dallas.
And so did he say he was working on getting the tabs or trying to get them?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point, did he give you an insurance card?
Yes, he did.
And did you look at it?
Yes.
Did it convince you that there was insurance on that vehicle at the time?
No.
Why?
I did look at the insurance card that was handed to me by Dante, and I observed the name on the insurance card to be, I believe, a...
Well, you don't have to give us the name.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't Mr. Bryant's name.
No.
Either Mr. Bryant's name, right?
No.
And it appeared to be outdated.
Yes.
And so what did you do then after he gave you that?
At this time, I handed him back the insurance card and just advised him that I don't believe that was the correct insurance. Basically told him to continue to look for the insurance, and that would be back with them, and then I went back to my squad car.
Okay. And why did you go back to your squad car at that time?
At that time was to run the information that he gave me, making sure he is who he says he is. If he basically running through our system, the Hennepin County, like I said, on the computer, knowing that he wasn't the registered owner, at that point, move forward, figure out who he is, operating the vehicle.
So at that point, during that interaction with him, was he respectful to you?
Yes.
Was he threaten you in any way, though?
No.
And he didn't indicate that he had a weapon or give you any reason to believe he had a weapon at that point?
No.
Okay. So then the female passenger during that interaction, did she talk at all to you during that, before you went back to the squad car?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay. Did she appear to be in any distress at all or anything like that?
Not that I recall, no.
So when you went back to the squad car to run his name and address, name and date of birth, let's see if that checks out. That was the point of doing that, right?
Yes.
Okay. And at that point, did you believe the information that he gave you was the truth, that he was telling you the truth?
Yes.
Okay. And why?
The information that came back with his date of birth that he gave me, his name, on our system when I ran it through our computer in our squad car.
Kind of, it all checked out what he gave you.
Yes.
So when you ran him in the computer, you know, as you sit in the squad car and do that, correct?
Yes.
And I don't want to get too deep into the technical details, but there are different ways that you can do that, correct?
Yes.
And did Officer Potter give you some instruction on how to do that?
Yes.
Can you describe that for the jurors, please?
The instruction was, for starters, we just discussed okaying myself, which is code 4ing myself with Hennepin County Dispatch. It's a button that we can tap on our computer to let the Hennepin County Dispatch know that we're okay. The fact that I did not run his information yet, she just corrected me to say, don't okay yourself until we know who we are actually dealing with. After that, I began running Mr. Wright's information through a state website, which is the MyBCA, which will pull up any Minnesota state ID.
And did his name come up in that system?
Yes, it did.
And did your FTO, Officer Potter, at that point in time point out why she had given you that advice then?
Yes, because if basically it was the date of birth that I was entering into the system as well. If you don't enter the date of birth, it just gives the program more room to think with, I guess you can say. If you gave me the wrong date of birth, it'd at least pop up the name and a date of birth at least is close to that. And at that point, that's when I took the driver's license OLN number from my BCA and placed that into another program that we use, which is our TriTech program.
So because you had his name and date of birth, you were able to get more information about him?
Correct, yes.
And when you did run that in this other program, what did you find out?
When I ran his information, basically anything that's a hot file is going to either make a ding noise, it speaks to us, it'll say wanted person, could be a warrant, could be protection order. When I ran the information, his information came up as a gross misdemeanor weapons charge, and under that was also a protection order for a female that I also observed on the screen.
And a protection order, as you're sitting there that day, tells you what about him?
That basically there is a order for protection. It was a female. I do not recall the exact name on that protection order. Basically, it explains and it tells me that he is, for one, not to have any contacts with this individual who's on the protection order.
But it does not tell you why, right? It just tells you there's no contact.
Correct, yes. And it explains the rules of no contact. It could be no calling, no texting, no going within a certain amount of feet of their home, place of employment, etc.
Okay, Mr. Frank, we need to take a break. Is this an okay time to break? All right, members of the jury, we're going to take a 20-minute break, okay?